We've tried everything, cutting down, switching brands, using less, stopping for stretches of time, smoking instead of shooting, snorting instead of smoking, and it has ended in failure each time. We always end up using more, not less, returning to shooting or snorting, or both, until we begin to realize that there is no way to control this thing. Each time we think we've got it figured out, it fools us and beats us again. Convinced we've got foolproof plans to live lives with drugs rather than totally without them, our intentions end in failure. We finally realize that when our addict brains tell us it will be just one more time and we can certainly handle it, it's lying. But it seems so truthful. It doesn't feel like a lie, and that's how we get tricked. The conscious intellect says, no, I can't use drugs, ever. It's bad and it will get out of control again. But the addicted subconscious says, nuh-uh, I swear this time it'll be different, I promise. And if you doubt me, just check your truth feeling meter. See, the feeling you naturally get normally when you hear a lie is not present, so I must be telling you the truth. Most minds are driven 70% by emotion and only 30% by logic or reason. We will be compelled towards what we feel much more than what we know, and it takes exhausting conscious effort to override this. A very intense personal feeling to quit our vice needs to take place. The human mind and spirit functions on a simple and absolute principle: pursue pleasure and avoid pain. The first time you use drugs, it is 100% pleasure. Yes, it can also be scary in some scenarios, but to the addict disordered mind, it is an entertaining and seductive type of scary that we are inexplicably drawn to, like a slasher movie or a roller coaster. When you're young, you don't even get hangovers. This makes the beginning experience nearly 100% pleasure with no pain. Over time, the pleasure diminishes as pain begins. The first hangover, late for work, a conflict with parents, girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. It's now 90% pleasure with 10% pain. Still an equitable trade. This offset continues to seek balance, becoming 75% pleasure, 25% pain, and so on until it becomes 50-50. Trouble in school, bad reputation, legal issues, family problems, all related to using. The now burgeoning addict does not perceive that the problems are a consequence of using. They feel it is society's issue with drugs, the family's attitude and disapproval. It is other people's lack of acceptance that causes the problems, not using itself. That's denial, baby. Yeah, the user argues, the only reason I fight with my parents over drugs is because they don't get it, man. If they were cool, we'd never fight about it. The reason we have conflicts about drug use isn't because I'm an addict, it's because my parents, spouse, employer, etc. are so uptight. According to the pleasure-pain principle, when it reaches 50% pleasure, 50% pain, drug use should no longer increase but stabilize, yet it continues to progress to 49% pleasure and 51% pain, a milestone where the pain now outweighs the pleasure. Once something is even 1% more painful than pleasurable, it's common sense we would stop. After all, we are conditioned to pursue pleasure and avoid pain, so if it's more pain than pleasure, even by only 1%, our subconscious should be compelled toward abstinence, at least theoretically. But there is a catch. Pleasure is defined as that which is essentially pleasurable and as that which is familiar. By the time we reach 49%, 51%, something has happened. Getting loaded, interacting with the drug scene, etc. has become so familiar that the subconscious continues to reinforce the addict behaviors, rejecting absence or sober behavior. The offset continues: 30% pleasure, 70% pain, 20-80, 10-90. Inevitably, if we keep using, we will arrive at 100% pain, 0% pleasure. Welcome to rock bottom. Rock bottom is the event of realization that drugs will ultimately only bring pain 100% of the time, and the pleasure of them is an illusion that is transitory and not worth it. It could come at 50 years old after taking a career, house, and family, or at 14 years old after getting busted by high school campus security for a joint. The depth of the realization to the individual, not the circumstances, of what qualifies as a rock bottom realization. Subjective opinion is everything. What the worst thing ever may be to me may be a whatever to you. The conundrum with rock bottom is that an addict cannot tell when or if they have arrived there. They're convinced every time they run out of dope or suffer a hangover that they're at rock bottom. A non-addict family member cannot evaluate it either because they have never been on either side of that fence. Only an experienced veteran addict who himself or herself has experienced rock bottom can have an insight or instinct to recognize a real rock bottom episode. It's a mystery to some, but with addicts, we know it takes one to know one. I can pick out an addict in a crowd of people by sort of an addict sixth sense. We are drawn to each other. It's a secret club. So is recovery. The experience of drug use as well as recovery is an informal cultural bond, an unspoken yet highly recognized bond that doesn't require confession or declaration. We can pick each other out. Just about every week I am in a session where someone is passionately proclaiming and convinced they're at rock bottom, yet they continue to use within a few days. An addict who is convinced they are at rock bottom isn't. It is too visceral and intense and incomparable to have any reliable sense of being there when you actually are there. Every addict I've known who went through genuine rock bottom, including myself, never knew it at the time it was happening. It was only through hindsight and retrospection that they figured out what they had been through was actual rock bottom. We can look back and even identify the moment of the event, often referred to as the moment of clarity, but no one saw it as rock bottom while it was actually occurring. While you're in it, you feel hopeless and exhausted from your addiction and sense that you've been wrong about so very much in life and about yourself that you couldn't possibly be having any real clarity. During actual rock bottom, you're certain of only one thing, that being wrong about everything your whole life got you into this misery, so how could you possibly be sure about wanting to stop now? You've sworn it was over before, so why should you believe yourself now? You've been in actual misery for so long that this moment is just another episode of suffering and misery, and even though it's the worst one, you cannot relate or conceive of any other way of feeling. It is not possible to know you're going through it when you're actually going through it, as you do not and cannot believe in anything you think or feel. You've successfully lied to yourself so many times before that you assume this is just once more. When someone is convinced and declares they are at rock bottom, it is a red flag that tells me, a veteran who's been there and done that they're not there. If we actually could know we're at rock bottom, we would be happy and hopeful that the beginning of the end has finally arrived. That is the quality of the pseudo rock bottom state. False rock bottom has happiness and relief and hope, but the real rock bottom is total and absolute fear, uncertainty, and as intense awareness that this addiction could very well go on and on and on and on. It is this fear and uncertainty that makes us dig deep and not take recovery for granted, to do what we were never able or willing to do previously for granted, to do what we were previously never able or willing to do. The complete acceptance of this state of suffering is so immense that the addict becomes desperate, and desperation is required. Rock bottom feels truly hopeless, and one of the worst things an addict can have is hope. Hope is suspect and should not be trusted, as it provides a false and dangerously risky feeling of safety. If I'm playing with a live grenade, well, it is probably a bad idea to have a false sense of safety that might make me careless. Boom! An addict who's never been at rock bottom themselves cannot identify it, and neither can a non-addict. Only one person is even remotely qualified to sense if someone is at true rock bottom or not. A dope fiend who's previously had the rock bottom experience, and no one else. Rock bottom is an intense and thorough immersion into despair. Actual rock bottom indicates that the person will get and stay clean. The term is not used for a partial or temporary realization. The term rock bottom is reserved for the absolute permanent realization. For example, nothing I can say or do could convince you that rain is anything but wet, right? Of course not. And nothing anyone can think of or feel again after rock bottom could ever convince them that there is any reason, situation, condition, or circumstance that could justify using as okay. Nothing. The realization is complete and absolute. The paradox is that it can be forgotten over time. Rock bottom is exceptionally rare, though it happens to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of addicts. You can pray for it and you can hope for it, but I tell you this, you'll regret those prayers and hopes while it's actually happening, and you'll pray for it to be over and to have never had the rock bottom realization to begin with. Once it starts, you'll wish for the good old days when you were a heartless dope fiend. Yes, I'm totally grateful for it now, but at the time I wanted to die, and that's putting it mildly. Being a dope fiend was easy compared to the rock bottom experience. Rock bottom is not simply running out of opportunities. It is a real and complete sense of running out of all options, and that sounds tremendously more promising and positive than it feels. I assure you, the rock bottom realization needs to occur, and there are 3 events that can facilitate this. 1, objective clarity, realization. 2, personal choice. And 3, tragedy. Rock bottom is a unique experience that varies from person to person. A 15-year-old gets a reprimand from her parents at the first use of pot. With objective clarity, she realizes she could lose parental respect and approval. She becomes aware of the chain reaction of negative consequences that will follow, and so she stops. Just like that, tragedy averted. Rock bottom. It happens this simply all the time, but since there's no tragic story involved, it goes unreported or even really acknowledged as a rock bottom experience. An independent adult is left for dead in an alley after ODing at a shooting gallery, getting sodomized, and being beaten to near death. These circumstances make him realize with objective clarity the inevitable outcomes of drug use. Rock bottom. Any and every experience that lies between the spectrum of parent alienation and the left for dead scenario can be rock bottom. There's a misconception that the rock bottom experience must be tragic and shocking to some conventional standard. I began doing drugs when I was 13, pot and alcohol. By 15, I was taking acid and a few pills and some coke. By 17, I was injecting cocaine and heroin, speedballs, cocaine mixed with heroin. And by 18, shooting coke or speed was pretty regular. By 20, it was an obsession and ruining my life more than I ever thought it could or would. I used off and on, never getting more than a month clean at a time for the next 10 years. At 28 years old, I became a father. By the time my new son was 8 months old, I was working construction and living in a one-room apartment. I was separated from my wife of 6 months, who was also severely dysfunctional, violent, drunk, etc. I was miserable again, but not more than usual. I was tired of dope and the patterns of it, but it didn't seem more extraordinary than any other times I'd been miserable from dope. It was always horrible until I was goofing off with my baby son, who was lying on the floor getting changed, and we were playing patty cake. I looked at his hand, so tiny. I compared it to my own hand, which was so much larger. It crossed my mind that no matter what I did, his little hand was going to grow, that his hand would get large like mine someday, and he was going to get older, and much like I had done with my own father, he was probably going to look up to me, no matter who or what I was. He was going to want to be like me. And who and what am I asked. And then the world caved in. I had a moment of total objectivity. I saw myself as I truly was, a dope fiend, not a father, not an employee, not a brother or son or a friend, a dope fiend, nothing more and nothing less. This realization was not intellectual, it was emotional and went through to the core of my soul. In that instant, I saw how my son would see me if he were older and capable of perceiving me honestly and clearly. How this innocent, pure, and simple boy would actually see me if he were cognizant and aware. He would see the truth that I was a dope fiend, and I was ashamed. I didn't just feel ashamed, I became shame. I was nothing but shame. In that instant, I truly saw that my whole life was a lie and had become a single denial mechanism. I was nothing good and had never been anything good. Over the next few hours, all my denial disintegrated. I saw my past and my present and was so disgusted I felt I could not go on. I wanted to die. I wanted to do more than die. I wanted to never have existed in the first place. I was in agony as I was forced to continue to breathe in and out and live every moment, hating myself and feeling more and more ashamed. I did not know what the future held, and I was not hopeful. I did not want a future or a present either. I did not decide to quit drugs because I had hope for a better sober life. I had to quit because I could not exist another moment the way that I was. I did not lose a house or a job or my child. I simply had a moment of clarity, a moment of complete objective truth, and was horrified by what I saw. My spirit was crushed, and who I was had to die. In those moments, I was dying and also being reborn, and birth is violent and messy. I would love to tell you that the ensuing days became more positive and hopeful and were filled with the "this is the first day of the rest of my life" optimism, but it wasn't. The next 3 months were pure agony and isolation. I literally sobbed myself to sleep every night, wishing and praying to never wake up. The next 3 months were unbearably lonely and depressing. Sobriety was not fun. I hated sobriety. I just hated being an addict even more. That's how I got through each day. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I only knew with intense hatred what I no longer could be. Physical suicide was not an option. I somehow intuited that suicide would be worse. I would probably botch it and end up vegetative instead of dead. Just my luck. I figured I'd just will myself to die, sort of give up the ghost, and just stop caring enough to even draw a breath, go to sleep and never wake up. There is always a contradictory nature to the truth. As absolute as the rock bottom experience is, it's simply not a cure. I bet there are desperate people reading the rock bottom literature wishing there were a rock bottom pill they could take. They're saying, "I'll suffer, that's okay, because I need to stop." There are two contradictions to this that can be hard to convey. One, be careful what you wish for. Some people do not survive their rock bottom experience. I said there was only one way left to go and it was up, but that's not entirely accurate. There's also death. Many people choose this option. As one guy told me about his rock bottom, I couldn't go on. I knew I was to be enslaved forever, that I was owned by heroin and could never break free. So I went into the bathroom while my parents slept and shot up. A huge hit. And it didn't kill me, so I did another. And it didn't kill me, so I did another. I wanted and was prepared to die and let it win since it already had. I woke up 2 days later in the hospital. This addict was saved and is clean to this day, but many rock bottoms do not survive to tell their story. It is a fine line, to be sure. 43,000 OD deaths in 2012 in the United States alone. Rock bottom is something that happens to many addicts, but it is not something you can consciously choose to experience. Yes, I've been instrumental in facilitating many rock bottom realizations, but this takes caution, experience, knowledge, care, and so many other factors that few should attempt to facilitate it. It is risky and dangerous, and if it goes wrong, the results can be death. Number 2, it is not a permanent realization. The incurable and permanent disorder of addiction is a lifelong pathology. It took over 10 years for me to relapse after my rock bottom, but I did indeed relapse. Not only did I use again after the visceral, absolute experience of rock bottom, but I also repeated my rock bottom experience as a result. I experienced the rock bottom realization experience slightly less intensely and definitely far less time, as it was proportionate to the relapse. I had gone 10 years clean and revisited drugs again in a different way. These two contradictions need to be part of the rock bottom knowledge. Don't forget them. We're never safe. The realization to move on from addiction is to become conscious of what's valuable. This is different for everyone because value concepts vary from person to person and at different stages of life. What's valuable to an adolescent is vastly different than what's valuable to a middle-aged family man. They both have so much to lose, yet the adolescent is much less aware of what they have to lose, whereas the middle-aged person is typically aware of what they've acquired, how rare it is to have acquired it, and how painful it may be to lose it. We cannot assume that an addict mind and personality has the same values that are conventional to most people or in the same way. They are different, not simply because they're ill with this disorder or under the influence. The disordered mindset of addicts, along with individual upbringing, cultures, and experiences, make each living person's values unique. Most people place value on the same ideas and concepts: love, companionship, comfort, etc. But we arrange values in different priorities. For example, some might feel that comfort is more valuable than love. However, addicts are disordered and under the influence, which clouds their ability to see and connect with their own values. For example, adolescents' values are underdeveloped and immature. In other words, the threat of loss to the adolescent is rarely a powerful enough force to have a rock bottom realization. Adolescents have accomplished comparatively little due to their short time on the planet and therefore don't truly understand loss. The more we've invested in something, the more desperate we are to protect it. Motivation to attain or sustain a thing is directly proportionate to the value we truly understand something has. When parents remind kids that drug use and recklessness is risking their future, this is an abstract notion kids cannot grasp in a significant way. The future is abstract to an adolescent. What is apparent and obvious to some, even many, is not apparent to others. Therefore, the better, sober life is not something the addict can see or imagine the same way the healthy non-addict does. A disordered addict mind sees the unfamiliar sober life as something scary and unfamiliar. Rock bottom could be triggered by a loss of a friend, lover, or family member due to a drug-related cause like OD, or the loss could be through a breakup, or family and dear friends may separate due to the excessive drug use. The shock of losing someone can be a horrific jolt that wakes up the addict with a profound, tragic rock bottom moment. However, loss is risky because often an addict might truly feel they don't have anything to try for anymore and can therefore go even deeper into drugs, giving up entirely. During or following a loss crisis, I encourage addicts and family members to have hope, but only as a possibility. Recovering from losses requires work, not hope. While there are no guarantees such work will pay dividends, all the hope in the universe will not create a happy life either. The slightest ray of hope that something could bring them back into the folds of those they love but lost along the way can be essential to accessing the strength to fight on and do the work. Anything is possible, but only misery and failure through using is assured and truly certain. While there's no guarantee sobriety will bring happiness, there's an absolute guarantee that addiction will sustain misery. Unfortunately, an addict will not shift into recovery mode until that moment comes when they have a personal desire that is bigger than the desire to do drugs. Since the desire to do drugs, as scientifically explained earlier, is an overwhelming desire, the bigger desire moment is hard to attain or even perceive. As a counselor, one of my main objectives is to help addicts find something profound in their lives or existences that means more to them than dope does, which will then override the subconscious desire for drugs. This bigger desire will not remove the desire for drugs, but it will supersede and displace it. I do not enjoy doing the dishes, but I require a semi-clean and organized home to feel sensible and ordered. My desire for clean dishes outweighs my contempt for the chore of doing them. My desire for a nice car or house outweighs my desire to sleep in and avoid work and bills. One set of desires displaces another. Awareness of personal values needs cultivation and takes time. Trying to get addicts to manage, slow down, or abstain from drugs is paramount to buying time in order to figure out that bigger desire thing out. The catch is this: if they see and connect with that profound bigger desire thing, they will then feel motivated and access a dormant inner strength needed to commit to recovery. However, when someone's thinking is influenced by the addictive mindset, it is not likely he or she will have enough clarity to recognize a bigger desire thing in his or her life. So forcing and pushing for absence is key. Addicts need clarity to see and connect with the bigger desire. Therefore, we need to buy as much sober time as possible. It's a catch-22. 1. Can't get motivated unless clarity of true life objectives is present. 2. Can't get clarity without abstinence. And 3. Can't get abstinence until motivated. Clarity spawns motivation, and motivation spawns clarity. Yet, no clarity means no motivation. No motivation means no clarity. No wonder addiction kills. Hope, to desire with expectation of obtainment. Confidence, a quality or state of being certain. Hope and confidence are essential to recovery. They are required ingredients of success in all endeavors. The healthiest and most productive ratio of these needed ingredients is 30% hope and 70% confidence. Believe in what you're doing and why you're doing it. Hope is free, and anyone can do it at any time about anything in particular. Hope is an emotional quality, and we can add to our courage and endurance as we hope and believe that our efforts will pay off in results. We do not require evidence, knowledge, or facts to have hope. We only need to choose it and believe in it. However, belief and hope is rooted in opinion, and opinion is an objective reality, meaning it depends on an individual's perspectives and understanding. Remember that subjective perception is dependent upon an individual's particular view, and an objective perception is not dependent upon anything, as it is a component of reality. Refer back to the example of rain. The subjective perceptions of rain can be good or bad by varying degrees, but the objective reality of rain is exempt from the perceptions of good or bad. It is wet, and that's all. Anyone who argues that water and rain is not wet is living in a delusional and entirely subjective reality that is simply not real. Hope is integral and gives us strength and motivation, but it does not get the job done. All the hope in the world will not guarantee the next card dealt will be an ace. If we get the card we hoped for, we will assuredly believe our hope was the catalyzing factor that brought it about. However, if we get any other card, unfulfilled hope is rarely cursed or blamed. It is merely discarded like the unwanted card. Hope gets much of the credit when things go favorably, but none of the blame when things go awry. Have hope. It's integral, but do not rely on it. Hope is not magic. Confidence is not free. It costs time and effort. It takes time and effort to gain knowledge, and it takes insight and practice to build a relationship with reason. I have confidence that when I put gas in my car, it will run. I have confidence that if I turn on the light switch, I'll be able to see better. If we read instructions on baking a cake and those instructions are thorough and we follow them in detail, we will have confidence that a cake will be produced. If we practice by making many cakes, we will gain experience and also confidence that following the recipe in detail will indeed produce a cake, likely a good cake. Not hope, but practice will build our confidence. Too much confidence is not a good thing, as it makes us lazy from a false sense of security. Not enough confidence, and we will apply only half-hearted efforts. We need the right ratio of confidence. Not so much we feel entitled, but not so little we're weak. Confidence and hope are very similar, with the exception that confidence is rooted more in certainty and hope is rooted more in belief. Hope can and should be rooted in confidence, and confidence should be rooted in hope. Have hope that knowledge and opportunity will come your way. Have confidence that you will take advantage of that knowledge and those opportunities. Have hope that there is a way out. Have confidence that you will work hard to find and use it. Blend recovery with both. 30% hope, 70% confidence. A man's town was being washed away by floods. His neighbors and family asked him to leave town with them before the flood hit, and he said, It's okay, God will save me. The flood came and his house was covered in water, forcing him to the roof to escape drowning. A man in a boat motored by and offered to save him. Nope, he said, it's okay, God will save me. Soon a helicopter flew over his roof, and when the pilots saw him, they lowered a rope to rescue him. Nope, no thanks, it's okay, God will save me. He had a lot of hope. When he drowned and got to the gates of heaven, he asked why God had not saved him and was told, what are you kidding? What are you talking about? He sent you friends and neighbors, a man in a boat and a helicopter, all of which you refused. Hope is not magic, it is opportunity. Confidence is being willing to exploit and capitalize on hopeful opportunities. Pray, believe, and hope, but also get in the boat when it comes. I hope that divine forces are working on my behalf, and I have confidence that I will take advantage of any opportunity presented to me. I will sacrifice and work hard to keep my mind sharp, my character good, and my body healthy so I can climb that rope into the helicopter when it comes. There is a difference between realizing and knowing. Knowing something is to accept it as truth. Realizing something, i.e., having realization, is thorough, complete, and absolute. Realization is a personal identification of the truth of a thing's nature and essence. An addict cannot simply believe drugs equal suffering. They must go on to know it and eventually realize it. For the sake of understanding the concept, it can be interpreted as degrees. The first degree of recovery is triggered by belief, so recovery is seriously considered. The second degree is triggered by knowledge, and an acceptance of truth has taken hold. The third and final degree is through realization, and there is absolute certainty that recovery is the only option. Addiction is like a hot stove. If you turn it on, let it get red hot, and place your hand on it, you will get burned. Now, I seriously doubt anyone reading this will attempt that. Please don't. You know what hot is, and you don't have to get burned to know with complete and total faith and confidence that it will hurt like hell. There is no doubt in your mind that the hot stove top will burn you badly, so don't touch it. Yet, somehow with drugs, you keep convincing yourself that you can mess around with them and not get burned. That this time will be different when we have 100% faith and 100% understanding and confidence that we will get burned 100% of the time, not 99.99999% faith and understanding, but 100%. We will stop. Realization is knowing 100% that if we use, we will get burned. Program it in your head. Hardwire it. Never even consider for a moment that you can touch it and avoid getting burned. Your faith and belief and understanding must be cultivated until it is 100%. I wouldn't put my hand on a red hot stove, and I cannot use drugs with any illusion of safety. I will get burned 100% of the time. The logic behind the inevitability of quitting is simple. Using is a dead end, often literally. It is only a matter of time before the 0% pleasure, 100% pain principle plays out. The moment an addict actually and fully realizes and accepts this simple logic, the sooner he or she may decide to enter into recovery and truly try. It is the families and counselors' jobs to bring him or her to this realization, which is so often postponed due to involved people who are enabling or toxic influences. The rug must be pulled out and the losses must be felt. This is covered in more detail in the coming section on intervention. Quitting is inevitable. The only variables are when and on whose terms.